ahead and get started. We're going to do things a little different today because I didn't give you all much of a warning. So we're going to read this together. And it's 4 chapters. They're not very long chapters in Ruth. Matter of fact, one of the chapters is only 15 verses. So we're going to read it together. And then we're going to come back and look at it a little slower, and probably going to do chapter 1 and 2 today, and chapter 3 and 4 tomorrow, or next Sunday. Ruth is a very, very deep book. A lot of people look at it, well, it's a love story. It's a wonderful love story. Well, it is a love story. But there's a couple reasons that Ruth is put in the Bible. First of all, fills in some gaps in the lineage of David and thus Jesus. Okay. Without it, there would be a small gap in the genealogy of Jesus that we couldn't ascertain. Another reason it's in there is to allow us to learn much the same other scriptures are and the other things that you might call stories, or Jesus' parables, for instance. They're teaching that they have a deeper meaning than just the surface. And there's a deeper meaning in Ruth. There's several deeper meanings in Ruth. And we're going to talk about those. Now, we may not get to those till next week. I don't know. We're going to see how time's moving. But I got up here about 6 minutes, 7 minutes after. So we'll just go with this as far as we can go today in the time allotted, and we're going to pick it up next week. And that'll give you all some time to study the deeper meaning of Ruth. Because while all the people mentioned in this story were real people, this is a fact in history, just like every other thing we read in the Bible. The deeper meaning of Ruth is it will give you chills, okay? So we're going to go ahead and start reading. It's Ruth 1, chapter 1, verse 1. It says, "Now it came to pass in the days when judges ruled that there was a famine in the land. And a certain man of Bethlehem, Judah, went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons." Okay, we're going to stop right here a second. There was famine in the land. When was this? It was in the days of the judges. Now, for those of you that remember, when Joshua first came into the Holy Land, Israel did not have a king. God didn't want them to have a king. He wanted them to be ruled by judges. And the judges would hear cases among the people and basically do God's work. We know probably one of the most famous judges was Samson. He was a judge. Name me some more. Let me just put it this way. Israel went kind of like America. You know, when it started out, it had pretty noble intentions. But the farther it went, the further it got away from its founding principles, the more lawless it became. There were some really bad years during the judges. People were, I think if you'll read about it in the Bible, what's the phrase it uses? every man did as he saw fit in his own eyes. You know, there was no justice, there was no moral code. You did whatever you wanted to do. That's generally leads to chaos. It says, and the name of this man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi, and the name of his two sons Milan and Chilion. They are Ephrathites of Bethlehem, Judah, and they came into the country of Moab and continued there. We probably talk in a little more detail about Moab next week. But Moab was not a good place. The Jews considered the Moabites as not much higher on the scale than a dog. Okay, so for Elimelech to go there, a lot of Jews would have considered that almost treasonous. You know, almost like he was abandoning the beliefs of his founding father.
I've got a note in my Bible, like a arrow from Moab, saying it was God's cesspool.
Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't a good place. But they went there, and it says they continued there. And Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died. And she was left, and her two sons. Now, I don't know how long it took between when they went and when they died, but I do know this. I know that she was over there for 10 years. Okay, so God did not bless the move. Let's put it that way. But as always, what we see as tribulation, terrible thing, there's always a plan. There's always a plan. You need to understand the names of these people. And yesterday, Mary and I was reading this part out loud to Mary, and I was saying all these names. Did you know the names of her sons? Look at them there. Milan and Chilion. The first son was named unhealthy. That's what Milan means. The second son was named puny.
Oh, good grief.
Now, how'd you like to grow up with them names?
Why would
Sounds
you
like a
name
boy
your
named
kids-
Sue.
Why would you name your kids that? Because they were worthy.
Why would you name your kid Malhalalel? Because God told you to. People really thought about and prayed about and searched for names for their children. And what it comes out to find is generally folks live up to their name. Okay? So these two sons weren't all that in that great a shape when they left. May have had something to do with why they left. I don't know. But it says, her two sons took them wives. It says, and they took them wives of the women of Moab. The name of one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. And they dwelled there about 10 years. And Milan and Chilion died, also both of them. And the woman was left of her two sons and her husband. Then she arose with her daughters-in-law, that she might return from the country of Moab. For she had heard in the country of Moab how that the Lord had visited his people in giving them bread. In other words, this famine was over, at least as far as Israel went. God was taking care of Israel. So what it implies is Israel went through a little a little judgment, you might say. And then God had mercy on them and sent them crops. And it says, wherefore she went forth out of the place where she was, and her 2 daughters-in-law with her. And they went on the way to return to the land of Judah. And Naomi said unto her 2 daughters-in-law, go, return each to her mother's house. So she told them, listen, you're released of any kind of obligation you have to me. Go back home with your mother. And maybe you can find yourself a good husband. It says, the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me. In other words, you don't have to stay with me. You've honored any kind of obligation. Now you need to go back home and maybe you can salvage your life because you're still young. It said, the Lord grant you that ye may find rest, each of you, in the house of your husband. Then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voice and wept. So these were 2 pretty good girls, weren't they? Both of them were. Now, I don't know how, if your name is unhealthy and the other one's name is puny, how you get 2 good women, but it seems like these boys looked out pretty good, didn't they? And Moab, to find 2 good wives in Moab is probably hard to do. So they said unto her, surely we will return with thee unto thy people. And Naomi said, turn again, my daughters. Why will ye go with me? Are there yet any more sons in my womb, that they may be your husbands? Turn again, my daughters. Go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. If I should say I have hope, if I should have an husband also tonight, and should also bear sons. In other words, even if I were to get a husband right now, y'all know there's no way I could have any more sons. Now, what she's referring to is the Jewish tradition. It's in the Torah. It's in the book of Moses, where if a man dies without an heir, his brother is obligated
Take his wife into his own house.
to see that his wife has offspring, so that his brother will continue his inheritance. You see, we're going to talk in a little more detail, so you might want to hop back there and look. But you remember when Judah, his son, married Tamar and died? And he sent her to his son Onan. And Onan married her. He didn't marry her, but he slept with her to give his brother seed. And he didn't consummate the act to keep her from getting pregnant. And God punished him and he died. And Judah's like, hey, ho, you live here, I'll take care of you all your days of your life. And when my young son gets older, he'll honor that. Well, his young son got older and he didn't honor that. So after Judah's wife died, she heard he was going to the shear sheep, and she dressed up like a harlot. You remember when that happened? And she kept his staff, his signet, and something else. We'll have to read up on it before next week, because it does have a bearing here. And he slept with her, thinking she was a harlot. And then she kept those things because he didn't have any money with him. So he left. When he sent somebody back to pay his debt, she was gone. And he never could find this harlot again. Well, when the family finds out Tamar's pregnant, they tell Judah he needs to put her to death because she's been playing the harlot with somebody. Well, he goes to execute the judgment, and she said, yeah, I'll tell you who's responsible for my condition. And she has his signet and his staff. Then he remembers how he reneged on her promise. And she gave birth to twins, if you'll remember. And Jesus' ancestry comes through Tamar. God uses the strangest people to affect His will and to play a huge part in history. We're going to talk about the 4 women who are mentioned in the genealogy of Jesus. I'm going to talk about them today, but if you got a chance, if we don't get to it today, y'all try to see who those are. Can anybody name them right now? Tamar, that's right. Anybody name any more?
Yesterday and today.
No.
Lois?
But that was funny. Tamar, yesterday and today.
I was gonna say Ruth, maybe?
Yeah, Ruth, the lady we're reading about right now. Yes, absolutely. She's mentioned in the genealogy of Jesus.
And of course Mary.
Yeah, well, no.
No, that's before.
Everybody knows who his mother is. I'm talking about way back. Let me just tell you how unusual that is for Jewish people. The seed comes through the man, right?
Right.
Yet in Genesis 3, what does this say?
So Eve was one of them.
Well, no.
Oh.
But it says the seed of the woman and your seed. I'll put enmity between her seed and your seed. Now that's odd because that's the first intimation of a virgin birth. And why did the old Jews who were copying Scripture, why did they not change that to the seed of the man? And left it what would seem incorrect, because the woman doesn't produce seed. The man's the seed, the woman's the egg, right?
Right.
But no, it wasn't changed. Because the reason it wasn't changed is because Jews have strict rules. You write it down like it says, or you're killed. Okay? So that's why it was preserved through all those years. Do you think the Jews had any inkling that that line meant a virgin birth? Well, at least not until, who was it, Isaiah? Said it would be born of a virgin. So, they'd been around a long time by then. The books of Moses had been written down for a long time by the time that was said. So, pretty amazing stuff. Yeah, so we got 2. We got Tamar and Ruth. Who's another biggie that's totally out of character?
Bathsheba.
Bathsheba's one. That's right. There's one known. Between Tamar and Ruth. We get into this, you're going to see why Boaz, it was illegal for a Jew to marry a Moabite. It was illegal. But you're going to find Boaz to be not only a powerful man in the city, you're going to find that Boaz didn't care what the law said. And he had good cause why he didn't mind marrying a girl from Moab. Who was Boaz's mother? Mary's gonna start searching. I'll save you some searching. It was Rahab.
She was also a harlot, wasn't
Do you know who Rahab was?
she? She's helped the guys escape over the wall.
Bingo! Very good. So why did they go to that town? Why did they send 2 spies into Jericho? Did they go case the city?
Yes.
No,
No.
not really. God sent those 2 spies there to save Rahab. That can be, really, when you read the story, that can be the only explanation. And Rahab married Salmon. By Rahab's faith, she was saved. Remember they said hang a scarlet ribbon on your window right here, and when time comes, we won't bother this section. Get you and all your family in here. Because of Rahab hearing of the God of the Israelites and believing that their God was the real God and hiding those spies, Rahab became in the lineage of Jesus. Isn't that amazing?
That is amazing.
So you take one woman who played a harlot, acted like a harlot. You got one woman that actually was a harlot. And then you've got an adulteress in the line of Jesus, who was Bathsheba.
Mm-hmm.
Really, the best out of the bunch
With Ruth.
was probably Ruth. And she was a Moabite. Isn't that something? Now, we can't be harsh on Tamar, though. Because Tamar, she didn't do anything untoward. Because she was lied to and abused by Judah's family. So, we really can't hold what she did to her father-in-law against her. It was his fault that she had to do that. So, here's the custom. You go to your near kinsman. If you were a woman and your husband died without giving you a child, you went to his near kinsman. That means the next kin closest to your husband when he died. And you asked to be taken in. You have to ask. The woman has to ask. The man has a choice. He doesn't have to do it. He has to be willing to do it. He has to be able to do it in the eyes of the law. He doesn't have to do it. But here was the custom. If he didn't do it, he took off his shoe and handed it to the woman. And she spat on him and took it. And then for a next, I don't know how long a period it was, he had to go with one shoe on one foot so that everybody saw him knew he didn't honor the law. You're going to find the shoe mentioned here in Ruth. So we're going to keep reading. Naomi, and we already read that. It says, "Turn again, my daughters, to go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. If I should say I have hope, if I should have a husband also tonight, and should also bear sons." So, in other words, she's telling them, hey, you're released. There's no way I can ever have sons to give you children through the bloodlines of your husband. Would you tarry for them till they were grown? Even if she could bear sons, would they be willing to wait until they were grown? It says, would you stay for them from having husbands? Nay, my daughters, for it grieveth me much for your sakes that the hand of the Lord is gone against me. See, Naomi's feeling all down and rejected because this happened. She lost her husband and both sons. You think at this point she's probably regretting that they left Israel and went to Moab? I think so. But let me tell you something. There's a reason they did. Do you think God can use your sin not only to teach you a lesson, but to accomplish His mission? Absolutely He can. We've already talked about how people have tried to shortcut God's timeline and actually managed speeding it up and playing a part in the speeding up. So yeah, we can say Elimelech and Naomi should have never left with old unhealthy and puny. But they did. And God used that. God used that to get a great-great-great-great-grandmother for His son. Pretty amazing stuff. And they lifted up their voice and wept again, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law. But Ruth clave unto her. And she said, Behold, thy sister-in-law is gone back unto her people, and unto her gods. Return thou after thy sister-in-law. Naomi's still trying to get Ruth to go. And Ruth said, Entreat me not to leave thee, or to return from following after thee. Now listen to this. This is pretty awesome. Ruth was really something. For whither thou goest, I will go. And where thou lodgest, I will lodge. And thy people shall be my people, and thy God, my God. Ruth was pretty dedicated to her mother-in-law, wasn't she? She said, Where thou diest, I will die, and there I will be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if aught but death part me and thee. In other words, she said, I'm staying with you until one of us dies. That's pretty awesome dedication to one's mother-in-law.
Yes.
And this is a mother-in-law that had nothing, okay? It ain't like she was rich. Ma-in-law had nothing. Ruth was still a beautiful, vivacious young woman. She could have got out and done much better for herself. She said when she saw that she was steadfastly minded to go with her, then she left speaking unto her. In other words, she left her own. She's like, all right, satisfy yourself. Come on with me. So when they two went until they came to where? You think Bethlehem is going to have an important role in history at some time in the future? Yeah, I think so. I think so. That all the city was moved about them. Now remember, Bethlehem was not a big town. 6,000 or 7,000 people. You know, not a huge metropolis. It's kind of like the area of Troy and Union City. And you think about how many people you know. Evidently, a lot of people knew Naomi. Because her name means pleasant. Said when they came back, there was much commotion. And they said, Is this Naomi? Listen to what she says unto him. She said unto them, Call me not Naomi, call me Mara. You might know what Mara means?
Bitter one.
Huh?
The bitter one.
Bitter, that's right. Call me bitter. Don't call me pleasant. Call me bitter. For the Almighty hath dealt very bitterly with me. I went out full. Listen to what she says. I went out full, and the Lord hath brought me home again empty. Why then ye call me Naomi, seeing the Lord hath testified against me, and the Almighty hath afflicted me? Think Naomi's feeling sorry for herself? Oh yeah. But who wouldn't be?
Right.
She's lost her husband and both sons. My goodness. She's got a right to be tore up about it. Yeah. It says, so Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law with her, which returned out of the country of Moab. And they came to Bethlehem. Listen now. In the beginning of barley harvest. So you think the timing was an accident? No, they're going back there because they heard there's food. Okay, there's been a famine in the land for 10 years. They picked. Naomi knew enough about home. She knew when the harvest would be, and she knew that they would be able to glean. Okay? It says, and Naomi had a kinsman of her husband's, a mighty man of wealth of the family of Elimelech, and his name was Boaz. Listen, he is a mighty man of wealth. Y'all keep that in mind. And Ruth, the Moabitess, said unto Naomi, let me now go to the field and glean ears of corn, after him in whose sight I shall find grace. She shall find what?
Grace.
What was she looking for?
Grace.
She's looking to get on
Y'all
the
understand where this is heading? And she went, and she came and gleaned in the field after the reapers. And her hap, now what that means is, by chance, she just happened to light on the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the kindred of Elimelech. Now, I'm going to say Ruth was a cutie. Probably looked a little out of place gleaning in the field. You with me?
Yeah.
Because Boaz says unto his servant, who was set over the reapers, whose damsel is this? And the servant, who tells Boaz and introduces, basically, Ruth to Boaz.
The servant.
What's his name?
I think it says, does it?
Yeah, don't bother looking. Because it never says. But he played a pretty important role, didn't he? In getting them together. Because he caught her eye. Now, if that guy had said, I don't know. But listen to what he tells him. He said, it is the Moabitish damsel that came back with Naomi out of the country of Moab. And she said, in other words, he's telling Boaz what she told him. And she said, I pray you let me glean and gather after the reapers among the sheep. So she came and hath continued, even from the morning until now, that she tarried a little in the house. Then said Boaz unto Ruth, hearest thou not, my daughter? Go not to glean in another field, neither go from hence, but abide here fast by my maidens. In other words, you stick with my family. You reap in my fields. It says, let thine eyes be on the field that they do reap. In other words, look at these people and remember them. And wherever you see them reaping, you go there and reap. He's making a special allowance for Ruth. Okay? It says, go thou and reap after them. Have I not charged the young men that they shall not touch thee? In other words, nobody's going to aggravate you. And when thou art athirst, go into the vessels and drink of that which the young men have drawn. In other words, you drink out of our water, you handle it, you just be a part of the family. Listen to what she did. It says, then she fell on her face and bowed herself to the ground. And said unto him, why have I found grace in thine eyes that thou shouldest take knowledge of me, seeing I am a stranger? And Boaz answered and said unto her, It hath fully been showed to me, all that thou hast done unto thy mother-in-law since the death of thine husband, and how that thou hast left thy father and mother, and the land of thy nativity, and art come unto a people which thou knowest not heretofore. The Lord recompense thy work, and a full reward be given thee of the Lord God of Israel, under whose wings thou art come to trust. Then she said, Let me find favor in thy sight, my Lord, for that thou hast comforted me, and for that thou hast spoken friendly unto thine handmaid, though I be not like unto one of thine handmaids. In other words, she's thanking him and she's saying, I realize I'm not as good as the Jews, the handmaids you have of the Jews. And Boaz said unto her, At mealtime, you come thou hither and eat of the bread, and dip thy morsel in the vinegar. This is a bad translation. This was grape juice. This was wine. What did Jesus do at the Last Supper? He broke bread, didn't he? And wine. What were they dipping the bread in? Wine. Because when the one that was about to betray him, they said, the one who dips in after me. And Jesus took the bread and dipped it in the wine. Who dipped in after him? Jesus used the word sop. The one who sops after me. Strangely, that we should call later Judas the son of perdition. S.O.P. Ever think about that? That's another story for another day. Let's get back to Ruth. He says, you come with me, you eat with us, you dip your morsel, your bread in the wine. And she sat beside the reapers, and he reached her parched corn. Any of you ever had parched corn? It's really good. My granddaddy used to make it. You just take field corn, and you put it in a skillet with hot oil, and it pops. Now, unless it's actually called popcorn and makes a big white fluffy thing, it actually pops and swells up in what people call beer nuts. It's whole kernel, field corn, that's been parched in hot oil. And it pops and swells up, and it's hard to eat. It can be a little hard on your teeth. But boy, you salt it down good, and it's really good. And my granddad used to make it on the stovetop. And he reached her parched corn, and she did eat. And was sufficed and left. In other words, she filled herself up. And she was risen up to go glean. Boaz commanded his young men, saying, listen to what he tells those people working for him.
Basically, she was out there picking up what they had
They left. You got to understand, just like the law of the kinsman redeemer, the Jews had a law that said the owner of the field got to make one pass. So he hired all his gleaners. They got out there and they went through picking. Well, guess what? Some of the ears might not be ready yet. Some of the stalks might not be ready yet. Some of them might look a little wormy. You know how that goes. Some of them might look a little sickly. Well, they just leave those. And the poor, this was God's welfare system. Is what it was. It was God's welfare system. For the poor and the needy, they could go behind them and they could glean. And they could actually, if you worked hard enough, you could glean enough grain to do you for a year. Because remember, these people weren't just gleaning. Now, Boaz gleaning to sell. He's selling wheat on the market. But the poor people who would go behind and glean, they were, because there's only a few harvests in the year, depending on what you're harvesting. Here they're harvesting barley, and wheat will come next, usually in the harvest, wheat will. So these people had to glean enough to feed themselves for a year. Or, of course, you had people who gleaned and sold what they had for money to get other things. So it was a big deal. It says, Boaz commanded his young men, listen to what he tells them, let her glean even among the sheaves. In other words, once you cut the stalk and stack it up over there, if she wants to come over and get some, you just leave her alone. It says, reproach her not. And now listen to what he says, and let fall also some of the handfuls. In other words, when you get done shelling it, because remember, back then, the machine didn't do it all. You cut the stalks, you carried them over there, you stacked the sheaves up, you threw the ears in one pile, and you put the stalks in what we call sheaves. You stack them up. You stand them up so that they'll dry out, so that the cattle will eat them later. You didn't waste nothing, okay? So he tells them, when you get done pulling ears and shucking, you're going to shell it. Well, the way you shell barley, you can just rub it around in your hand. But what's mixed in with that? With the barley grains. Just like wheat, huh? Chaff. Chaff. So they have a place, every town, every major significant landowner probably had his own place. What they called a threshing floor. And it's a big flat spot, and they'd make the ground good and hard as dirt. And hopefully it was on a high spot where it caught prevailing winds. And they would sift. You could see them doing it. They would sift that, shake it around in those big hoops lined with linen, and then they'd throw it up in the air. The wind would carry the chaff away. And the grain would fall to the ground right in front of them. So they'd do that, they'd scoop it up, and they'd throw it up, then they'd get them another scoop it up, and they'd throw it up. Eventually, when you got done, you had two piles. You had two piles. You had a pile of grain, and slightly more downwind, because that chaff was lighter than the grain, you would have a pile of chaff. And then they would burn the pile of chaff. Nobody wanted that. Lesson there too. We're going to talk about that. It says if she comes up and wants to take something that's already been cut and sheaved, don't stop her. Don't stop her. And if you see her picking up the little kernels that are falling out, don't stop her. She pretty much got free reign to do what she wants to, doesn't she? Boss done cast an eye on her and thought, this gal's pretty fine. Not only that, she has a very huge sense of honor by not leaving her mother-in-law. Right. He admired that. He admired that. So she gleaned in the field until evening and beat out that she gleaned. What does that mean? Well, you take it in sheaves and you whop it on something, and you get it's got husks in it still around the grain, but it falls into your bag or your basket, and then you just leave the stalk, All right, so she went to the city. It says it was about an ephah of barley. Now, how big's an ephah? Does anybody have that written in there? It's a pretty good size, of a pretty good weight. Let me put it this way. When she came back, Naomi's like, holy moly.
bushel.
Huh?
That's a whole bushel.
Whole bushel. Whole bushel of barley, just from gleaning. She took it up and went into the city, and her mother, what city? Okay, don't forget that. And her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned, and she brought forth and gave her to that she had reserved after she was sufficed. In other words, she ate what she wanted to. Now, I don't know if they made a porridge out of it. I don't know if they ground it up right then and made bread out of it. But her mother-in-law was no more hungry. Okay? And her mother-in-law said unto thee, where hast thou gleaned today? In other words, man, you made out like a bandit today. And where wroughtest thou? In other words, where were you working? Blessed be he that did take knowledge of thee. In other words, you didn't do this on your own. And she showed her mother-in-law with whom she had wrought. And she said, the man's name with whom I wrought today is Boaz. And then, ding! A light goes off in Mom's head. Listen. And Naomi said unto her daughter-in-law, blessed be he of the Lord, who hath not left off his kindness to the living and to the dead. Now, doesn't this signify a big turnaround? Didn't Naomi just say, last time we heard from her, don't call me pleasant, call me bitter. Isn't that what she said? Things are looking up, ain't they? All right. See how quick things can turn around? And Naomi said unto her, the man is near of kin to us, one of our next kinsmen. Now, there's a clue here. She says, one of our next kinsmen. Okay. And Ruth the Moabitess said, he said unto me also, thou shalt keep fast by my young men until they have ended all my harvest. In other words, she's sticking with them till the end of the year. And Naomi said unto Ruth, her daughter-in-law, it is good, my daughter, that thou goest out with his maidens, that they meet thee, not in any other field. So she kept fast by the maidens of Boaz, to glean unto the end of the barley harvest and of the wheat harvest, and dwelt with her mother-in-law. Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said unto her, my daughter, shall I not seek rest for me, that it may be well with thee? And now is not Boaz of our kindred, with whose maidens thou wast? Behold, he winnoweth barley tonight in the threshing floor. Wash thyself. I want you to pay attention to these steps. Wash thyself, and anoint thee, and put thy raiment upon thee. And get thee down to the floor, but make not thyself known unto the man, until he shalt have done eating and drinking. In other words, don't let him see you till he's done partied up a little. Okay? Because there were celebrations going on during these harvests. And it shall be, when he lieth down, that thou shalt mark the place where he shall lie. In other words, pay attention to where he puts his bedrobe. And thou shalt go in and uncover his feet, and lay thee down. And he will tell thee what thou shalt do. Sounds a little racy, doesn't it? Boy, y'all got dirty minds. And she said unto her, all that thou sayest unto me, I will do. And she went down unto the floor, and did according to all that her mother-in-law bade her. And when Boaz had eaten and drunk, and his heart was merry, she went to lie down at the end of the heap of corn. Or he went to lie down at the end of the heap of corn. What's he doing?
Taking a nap.
He's guarding his harvest. That's why they sleep there. They don't want to be cheated, and they don't want it to be stolen. And his heart was merry. He went to lie down at the end of the heap of corn. And she came softly and uncovered his feet and laid her down. And it came to pass at midnight that the man was afraid and turned himself. In other words, he just sobered up enough to realize that somebody was laying at his feet. And behold, the woman lay at his feet. And he said, Who art thou? And she answered, I am Ruth, thine handmaid. Spread therefore thy skirt over thine handmaid, for thou art a near kinsman. Now, this sounds really, really racy, doesn't it? Spread thy skirt over thy handmaid.
Here I am, Dad.
Yeah. That's not what it means. She's calling him out. Remember I told you the woman had to ask? Now the man didn't have to accept, but he had a problem if he didn't.
Right.
Remember the shoe? Okay. You need to realize, and if you'll read in Revelation, you'll see that when Jesus shows up, what does he have written on the hem of his skirt? Lord of Lords, King of Kings. Listen, back in that day, the embroidery on the hem of your skirt was your seal. If you had to sign a clay tablet, you lifted up the hem of that skirt and you put that embroidery in that clay and peeled it off. We wear, in the military now, we wear rank here on our sleeves. Back in that day, they wore it on the hem of their skirt, right above their feet. You could tell what kind of a rank a man had by looking at the hem of his skirt. What did the woman with an issue for 12 years, what did she reach out and touch? What did they not tear when Jesus got to the cross? They didn't tear the garment that he wore that was seamless, his cloak. Because it was worth a lot of money. It didn't have a seam in it. Coincidentally, how long did the woman have an issue of blood? Where was Jesus on the way? He's on the way because to heal the daughter of Jairus.
Okay.
How old was she?
12.
So, we have a Jewish girl that's dying. She's 12 years old. On the way to save the Jew, a Gentile woman is healed of an issue of blood for 12. Now, how do we know she was a Gentile woman?
Because they tried to keep her away.
No, because if you were a Jewish woman and you had an issue of blood, you were unclean. You couldn't commingle or cavort with any kind of a crowd. You had to stay away. On the way to restoring a Jewish girl, a Gentile was healed. Y'all hanging in there with me? So here's what she's saying. You're my near kinsman, and I want to be taken in under the hem of your skirt. I want to be protected and cared for by you. Well, the good news is, Boaz is all about some of this, okay? He done noticed her. We know he noticed her because of what he told her. And he's an older man. He's probably, my gosh, I bet he's in his 50s. Which was old for a man back in those days. Listen to what he says. And he said, Blessed be thou of the Lord, my daughter, for thou hast showed me more kindness in the latter end than at the beginning. In other words, this happening is making the end of my life better than the first. Listen to what he says. For thou hast showed more kindness in the latter end than at the beginning, inasmuch as thou followest not young men, whether poor or rich. In other words, she hadn't been looking at anybody else. There's better looking men around. There was younger men. There was more rich men. Since she'd been back, she hadn't looked at any of them. It says, and now, my daughter, fear not. I will do thee all that thou requirest, for all the city of my people doth know that thou art a virtuous woman. In other words, the story had done been around how she stayed with Naomi, even though Naomi released her, and she would not let Naomi continue by herself. So she had already made a name for herself as being a really good person in Bethlehem. It says, and now it is true that I am thy near kinsman, howbeit there is a kinsman nearer than I. Dun-dun-dun-dun. Okay, here's the bad part of the story. We got drama now. Boaz is not next in line. You can't skip the next in line, okay? Because Naomi wants her land redeemed. She wants an inheritance. She wants a seed to pass on her land to, her inheritance. The inheritance of Elimelech, okay? Now Naomi has no children. All she's got is this daughter-in-law. Tarry this night. Now listen to what he says. Tarry this night, and it shall be in the morning, that if he will perform unto thee the part of a kinsman, well, let him do the kinsman's part. But if he will not do the part of a kinsman to thee, then I will do the part of a kinsman to thee, as the Lord liveth. Now lie down until the morning. And she lay at his feet until the morning. And she rose up before one could know another. In other words, it was still dark. And he said, let it not be known that a woman came into the floor. Also he said, bring the veil that thou hast upon thee, and hold it. When she held it, he measured 6 measures of barley, and laid it on her. And she went into the city. This was code. This wasn't code for Ruth, because she wouldn't get it. It's code for Naomi. Now remember, Boaz has never laid eyes on Naomi, as far as we know, in this story, right? And when she had came to her mother-in-law, she said, who art thou, my daughter? And she told her all that the man had done to her. And she said, these 6 measures of barley gave he me. For he said unto me, go not empty unto thy mother-in-law. In other words, he pointed out that he wanted me to bring you this 6 measures of barley. Then said she, now listen, she knows what it means. She said, then said she, sit still, my daughter, until thou know how the matter will fall, for the man will not be in rest until he have finished the thing this day. How did she know that he was going to take care of it, and that he won't rest until it's finished? Because of the 6 measures of barley. How many days did God create the earth?
6.
It's the number of what? It's the number of, well, more than that. 7 is the number of what?
Perfection.
Huh?
Perfection.
Completeness or perfection. Finished. 6 is the number of we ain't quite done yet. We're not perfect. We're not finished. We're still working on it. I ain't going to rest. We're still in the 6th day. Okay? That was the message to Naomi. That he's going to work on it. And we're almost at the end. Okay? We're on 6 days. Because Naomi knew, listen, she said, for the man will not be in rest until he have finished the thing this day. She got the meaning of the 6 book measure. Then went Boaz up to the gate and sat down there. Now this is a place where Boaz went regularly, evidently. So he could have been a mayor of Bethlehem. He could have been a councilman. Whatever he was, he had a lot of power. Because, listen, it says, behold, the kinsman of whom Boaz spake came by, unto whom he said, Ho, such a one, turn aside, sit down here. And the guy turned aside and sat down. So Boaz had a little authority. Okay? And he called 10 men of the elders of the city and said, sit ye down here. He wanted witnesses, didn't he? 10 commandments. What is the commandments? They're a witness on you against the law of God, right? They stand as a witness to God's perfection, a testament to what he expects of you. He called 10 men of the elders of the city and said, sit ye down here. And they sat down. And he said unto the kinsman, Naomi that is come again out of the country. Now see, he starts off talking about Naomi. Then start off talking about Ruth. Naomi that is come again out of the country of Moab selleth a parcel of land, which was our brother Elimelech's. So in other words, they sold it and they left. Now they're back. Okay. She wants an inheritance. She wants her lot. She wants her parcel. Listen. It says, and I thought to advertise thee, saying, buy it before the inhabitants and before the elders of my people, if thou wilt redeem it. In other words, buy it back from whoever has it, so that she has it back. Listen. He said, but if thou wilt not redeem it, then tell me that I may know, for it is none to redeem it besides thee, and I am after thee. In other words, if you don't do it, I'm next in line. And he said, I will redeem it. Uh-oh. But listen, he started off talking about the land and Naomi. That wasn't a big deal, okay? Then said Boaz, what day thou buyest the field of the hand of Naomi, thou must buy it also of Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of the dead, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance. Now here's where the guy is like, uh-oh. And the kinsman said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I mar mine own inheritance. Why would he mar his inheritance? Because it was illegal to marry a person from Moab. Redeem thou my right to thyself, for I cannot redeem it. In other words, it's going to kick me out of an inheritance that's much bigger than getting what Elimelech and Naomi had. Now this was the manner in former time in Israel concerning redeeming and concerning changing. For to confirm all things, a man plucked off his shoe and gave it to his neighbor. And this was testimony in Israel. Therefore the kinsman said unto Boaz, buy it for thee. And he drew off his shoe. In other words, I can't redeem it. I know it's my responsibility under the law, but I can't do it because it's going to knock me out of a much bigger inheritance. So he took off his shoe. Now that meant that this man had to go with one shoe off for a certain amount of time. And listen to what Boaz said. And Boaz said unto the elders and unto all the people, you are witness this day that all that was Elimelech's and all that was Chilon's and Mahlon's of the hand of Naomi. Moreover, Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of Mahlon, have I purchased to be my wife, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance, that the name of the dead may not be cut off from among his brethren, and from the gate of this place. Ye are witnesses this day. Now why? And all the people were in the gate, and all the elders said, we are witnesses. The Lord make the woman that is come unto thine house like Rachel and Leah, which two did build the house of Israel. Well, that's the two wives of who? Jacob. Remember he worked for Laban, and Laban tricked him, and he had to marry Leah first? And then he had to work more years to get Rachel. And remember, he laid the staffs in the watering troughs because Laban said, all that come out spotted or speckled you can have, or striped. And he laid the staffs in the watering trough. And all that next generation of cattle and sheep came out with speckles or stripes. Laban made him a rich man. Well, God made him a rich man. So these people said, yay, I hope he blesses you and that pretty young woman as much as he blessed Rachel and Leah. Because all the Israelites came from those two women. Which two did build the house of Israel, and do thou worthily in Ephratah, and be famous in Bethlehem. Were they famous in Bethlehem? Absolutely. A lot of people have speculated that the pasture in which the sheep were being kept the night of the visitation of the birth of Jesus were the fields of Boaz and Ruth. Because that's where the sheep were raised for sacrifice in the temple. But listen to this. It says, and let thy house be like the house of Pharez, whom Tamar bore unto Judah, of the seed which the Lord shall give thee of this young woman. Who's Pharez? Or Perez? Some places it doesn't have the H. That's one of the twins that Tamar had. This would almost seem like an insult, wouldn't it? So Boaz took Ruth, and she was his wife. And when he went in unto her, the Lord gave her conception, and she bare a son. And the women said unto Naomi, Blessed be the Lord, which hath not left thee this day without a kinsman, that his name may be famous in Israel. And he shall be unto thee a restorer of thy life, and a nourisher of thine old age. For thy daughter-in-law, which loveth thee, which is better to thee than 7 sons, hath borne him. And Naomi took the child and laid it on her bosom, and became nurse to it. In other words, she babysitted this baby. She loved this baby. And the women, her neighbors, gave it a name, saying, There's a son born to Naomi, and they called his name Obed. What does that mean? Y'all got it? I think it means blessed of God. Oh, it means worshipped. That's what it means. So how did Naomi feel about that baby? She worshipped him. He is the father of Jesse, who is the father of David. Now these are the generations of Pharez that begat Hezron, and Hezron begat Ram, and Ram begat Amminadab, and Amminadab begat Nahshon, and Nahshon begat Salmon. Who is Salmon? No, this is way before David. It's Boaz's daddy. Who was Boaz's mother? Rahab. That's why Boaz don't care about no law that says he can't marry a Moabitess, because his mother was an Amorite. He's already cursed. He is a self-made man. He don't have to worry about his inheritance being taken for marrying somebody from Moab, because his mother was a harlot in Jericho. Praise God. He didn't care what the law said, because he knew what a blessed woman his mother was. And Salmon begat Boaz, and Boaz begat Obed. Obed begat Jesse, and Jesse begat David.